Hello and welcome into something a little bit new and a little bit different here on the Gamecock Central Podcast Network. I think rough draft, we're calling this Gamecock Central GM, or maybe GCC GM just for short. Maybe that's too many letters. We will kind of decide as we go along, and you know how naming podcast goes on the Gamecock Central Podcast Network. We're open to all sorts of suggestions, but I'm very happy today to be able to pick the brain of one Will Helms. It's the first time we've talked, at least on a podcast, since football season, and figured no better time to get back in touch and get this podcast between you and me back going again than in anticipation of the NFL Draft. One of the few sporting events that we actually have left right now, one of the few things that hasn't been canceled and then we get to look forward to. For a lot of people, I know it's maybe their favorite sporting event of the year because there's so much hope and so much optimism for all the teams and for all the players. And there's so much draft content. We wanted to kind of sift through all the fool's gold and get right to the gold, which is all that Will Helms brings, his unique evaluation process. And what we're going to do on this podcast is we're going to go through, each podcast is going to focus a little bit on a different position group, and not in a traditional mock draft like this person's going to go 7, this person's going to go 19, but just looking at each class, again, position by position. We're going to start today with the offensive line and go through all the position groups until we get to the NFL Draft. But I'm already getting ahead of myself. Like I said, Will, you and I haven't talked in a while. So how you been since the end of football season?
It's definitely been pretty interesting. And I'm big baseball fan, so was really excited for that. No baseball right now, so we'll see what happens. But just means that, there's more time to lean into the draft. So.
Plenty of time to break down tape and some of the Pro Football Focus numbers and other advanced analytics. And we're going to get into your entire process because, like I said, the reason that I wanted to do this with you and the reason that this is worth listening to as opposed to all the other millions of draft podcasts and things that are written about the draft out there is because you do have a unique process, a unique perspective in terms of evaluating talent that we're going to get to, both generally here in just a second and then individually as you look at each class. And I know you have a lot of different perspective on how to evaluate classes. You're not evaluating wide receivers and offensive linemen and tight ends the same way every year. Part of it is based on team need, and part of it is the other guys that are in the class, and context is key in everything. But before we get into your general process, we're in the middle of our second week of quarantine. You're a teacher, right?
Yes, sir.
So you are not in school. So what have you been doing to fill your time in quarantine other than just breaking down tons of tape?
So the main thing I've been doing is working on some online tutoring stuff, trying to get some opportunities to work with kids that maybe I wouldn't normally work with. I've been working, people listen know that I work with high school athletes. And so I've actually been working with a couple athletes. I've had some people reach out and say, hey, I play football, baseball and basketball. I've never had time to do any sort of ACT prep, SAT prep, but now I actually have some time. Could you do that? Is that something, that we can work on? And so working a little bit there, had a couple classes that I had to cancel because of all the, shelter-in-place stuff. Mm-hmm. But really just kind of working on some online tutoring, trying to do some brainstorming sessions. I'm terrible at forcing myself to sit down and, create a vision board and stuff like that. So I've been forced to kind of do that, which is not a bad thing.
Yeah, no, I mean, there a lot of being uncomfortable can ultimately end up being productive and lead to some of the most creative things. I read a book a couple years ago when I was in college called Boredom, and it was basically just why boredom is good and why we should encourage ourselves to be bored more. And basically the thesis was that it's like we can't be creative unless we're bored because that's when we let our mind wander and that's when we get some of our best ideas. So I totally get it. I've been working from home a lot lately, and it's been hard for me to kind of get in the zone and to make myself buckle down and to make myself focus. But in some ways it's been good because it's just been a different context, a different environment, and I feel like it's allowed other things to sort of get into my process that initially I thought, they were distracting me, and then I was like, well, wait a second, maybe there's actually some validity here. But it's definitely been unique. It's definitely been strange. It's cool for you to have the opportunity to work with some of those athletes you don't normally get a chance to. For those of you that don't know, that maybe didn't listen to our podcast in the spring or aren't familiar with Will's work, he's got a company and a website called PrepRA. It's prep-ra.com, and it's exactly what Will was just talking about in terms of all sorts of preparation for athletes and basically all different sports. I know you mostly do football, but you have some basketball students. You have some baseball students. I don't know exactly what else you have, but it's a lot of academic prep as well as breaking down tape and all the little things that nobody ever looks at or sees or talks about when you're talking about recruiting and participating in athletics at the next level. So it's cool that you've gotten the opportunity to maybe be a little more busy with that than you would have normally in this time of year with all the cancellations.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually started getting into a little bit of learning how to do lacrosse tape. I like lacrosse, big fan. Have no idea how to break down tape. Have no idea how to look at that kind of stuff. I usually outsource that. Sports I'm not as familiar with to other experts, but I'm trying to get to the point where I can actually do my own breakdowns, my own, I guess, sorting recruits into different, D1, D2 kind of thing. I do that for football, baseball, basketball, softball. Most of those sports have never really done that with lacrosse. Actually, I've been practicing a little bit with lacrosse there. So, pretty exciting. At the same time, you're right. I mean, boredom does have to force you to be productive sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I hope you take this the right way. You're one of those people that, whether, we're texting or I see you on Twitter or whatever, you pretty much always make me feel bad about myself because if you're not working on one thing, you're working on another thing. And so, during the quarantine or even if I was just like taking a day off, a month ago or whatever, I would get on Twitter and I'd see you like still breaking down, tape, watching like old random football games or baseball games. And I'm like, man, he's still being productive and it makes me just feel like a bum. But that being said, have you allowed yourself to, and like, I don't want to say enjoy your free time because I know you enjoy what you do very much, which is why you do so much of it all the time. But have you allowed yourself to just relax, just watch a movie, watch a TV show, do anything besides work on a lot of different things in quarantine?
Recently finished The Mandalorian, which was probably maybe a hot take, one of my favorite Star Wars entities yet. Not a huge Star Wars fan, but I like Star Wars. I don't watch that much TV, actually.
Makes sense.
And so that is a little challenging for, where we are now. But never really have been somebody that watches a ton of TV. And I'm notorious for, not just with TV shows, but with draft prep, with anything, starting with these grandiose ideas of I'm going to watch this and then do this, and then just starting things and not finishing them. So often I'll have this idea to do something and then just never finish it. So I'm trying to get better at that too.
Huh. That actually surprises me. You seem like a completionist. Like if you were to play like a Legend of Zelda game, I feel like you'd have to get all the hard pieces and all the items and all the upgrades and everything like that.
See, the problem is I do, and then I don't actually finish the game.
Okay. So you do all the side quests, you just don't even finish the main story?
Yeah, so there are times that I played Skyrim. I didn't finish the main story until I was like level 58, but I had done everything else in the game. So, but I'm really bad at finishing things, even though I think I'm going to be good at finishing them. So I go through very thoroughly and then don't actually finish them. One time I watched, this is, I guess, a random story, but I watched the show Psych a long time ago. Loved the show Psych. But I decided that if you're unfamiliar with the show, it's really stupid show. It's a guy that's a fake psychic, but no one knows he's a fake psychic except his partner. And everybody else thinks he's a real psychic, but he's really just kind of like Sherlock and very observant. But in every episode, they hide a pineapple. And I decided that not only was I going to watch through Psych, I was going to watch through Psych and find a pineapple in every episode. And I just happened to watch one on TV and record it in like season 7 and look for the pineapple. I watched the episode 4 times looking for the pineapple, and it happened to be the first one that didn't have a pineapple. So I gave up immediately and just didn't watch the show at all.
Are you serious? Because you couldn't find the pineapple?
Couldn't find the pineapple, so I just gave up.
That's really funny. I may have seen an episode of it. I'm obviously familiar with it. I've seen a million commercials for it, and there were always pineapples, or I felt like there were always pineapple, or there was a pineapple or something in commercials for it, and I never understood what the significance was. I thought it was just like, hey, this just makes it look fun and interesting, but I didn't know that was sort of a running joke in the show. Is there a story behind that? Do the showrunners just really like pineapples, or was it just something that they could hide to give regular viewers kind of an Easter egg? I
have no idea. The story I've made up in my mind is some random intern was in some meeting, and they were like, how can we make this show better? And they were like, well, we've had pineapples in a couple of episodes. Why don't we hide one in every episode?
That's great.
I have no idea if that worked or if that's how it worked, but that's the story I've created in my head.
You ever watch the show Community?
I haven't. It's on the list,
okay.
Which is a very long list that,
sure.
may or may not get completed at any point in my life. But, it's on there.
Well, okay. Well, I would say 2 things then. One, if you like those kind of hidden Easter eggs, then you would love the show Community, because there are like entire plot lines that unfold over the course of a season that never happen in the foreground. They're always in the background. So if you're just paying attention to like whatever conversation the main characters are having, you're going to miss like an entire storyline where like, one of the characters introduces two people and then they fall in love and then, they, have a kid and he delivers the kid. And like, there's a whole storyline that unfolds just in the background. And then there's this one running gag that I don't know. I feel kind of bad for ruining it, but maybe if I didn't say anything, you wouldn't notice it, but this will make you want to watch the show. Beetlejuice, like the thing with Beetlejuice is you say Beetlejuice 3 times like I just did. And then he appears. One time randomly in the first season of Community, somebody says, Beetlejuice, like they're making fun of somebody's pants and they're like, oh, like nice Beetlejuice pants, and that's it. And then like nothing happens. It's just part of the conversation. And then somebody same kind of thing in the second season. Beetlejuice just comes up in conversation, totally natural. You don't think anything of it. And then the third season, it happens again. And after the third time they say Beetlejuice, he just like walks by like a window, and the blinds aren't even like all the way open, so you can barely see him. But Beetlejuice like walks through the background. So it's a joke that they planned like 3 years before they were able to pay it off. And there's stuff like that all over the show. So if you like that, if you like that kind of stuff, you will love Community. And so there's 6 seasons of Community. I only watched the first 3 because then Dan Harmon, the showrunner, left after the 3rd season. So if you like Easter eggs and you like not finishing shows, Community is the show for you. Just watch the first 3 seasons and you're golden.
I'll absolutely have to do that then.
Perfect. All right, so we'll have plenty more time to discuss TV shows as we continue this quarantine, which who knows how long it's going to last. But we do only have a limited amount of time before we get to the NFL draft, which means we need to go ahead and get into discussing some of these position groups. We're going to start today with the offensive line, but before we get into specifically how you evaluated this offensive line class and the specific guys in this class, what's your approach generally, and how is it different than what most people are used to in terms of just looking at a mock draft?
So I think one of the terms that gets thrown around a lot that I absolutely hate is position of need or something like that, because obviously you want to improve your team. If I'm a GM, I want to make the team better. I'm probably not going to draft a quarterback high if I've got, Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes or something like that. I'm probably not going to draft a quarterback because that's not going to make my team better. At the same time, you have to recognize the importance of certain positions. I've mentioned earlier, I can't remember if we were recording yet or not, that I use the Draft Network. I love the Draft Network. I'm a premium subscriber there. They're just fantastic. And they have big boards that you can make, and you can make as many as you want. And the first one I made was I took a big board and said, okay, we can't make a big board without having positional importance on there. So I don't have a single running back in my top 50 because I'm a big Panthers fan, love Christian McCaffrey. The Panthers drafted Christian McCaffrey, and he could turn out. He had one of the greatest running back seasons in the history of the NFL last year, maybe the greatest. And the Panthers were horrible. Mm-hmm. They're drafting 7th this year. They were just so bad, even though Christian McCaffrey had a phenomenal year. That pick they picked him at number 8 2 years ago, so 2018. He's the 8th overall pick. It can, at the same exact time, be a good pick in that Christian McCaffrey's a good player, and a bad pick in that he hasn't really helped the Panthers get better. So running backs are a position I totally devalue. Another position that there are exceptions to this. Quentin Nelson is the first one that comes to mind immediately. Interior offensive linemen are not as important as tackles. It's a pass-first NFL, so if you have a good center, great. If you have a decent left tackle, it's better to have a decent left tackle and a good center than than having a great center and just not very much on the outside. So certain positions are going to be more important than other positions. Interior defensive line is kind of the same way until you find an Aaron Donald. There are 2 of them this year, in my opinion. We'll get to that later. But edge rushers are going to be more important than internal or interior defensive linemen. Linebackers aren't super important unless you've got there are a couple exceptions. There's one this year. And then safeties and corners are going to be really, really, really important in today's NFL. At the same time, you have to look at where you can succeed and where you can't succeed. Getting a really good offensive lineman late is difficult. Getting a really good wide receiver late is not difficult. So you're going to see some teams this year, and we'll get into this in just a few minutes when we talk about the offensive line class. You're going to see some teams that take maybe an offensive lineman that was lower down on their board over a really, really, really good wide receiver because they know they can get a pretty good wide receiver 3 rounds later, but they're not going to be able to get a pretty good offensive lineman, with a couple exceptions, a few rounds later. So when teams are picking, they're going to pick both on what is really the 3 things. What does their team need? Who's going to improve their team? So that would be 1. 2 would be what kind of players are going to go later and be okay to go later. So if you're going to see a lot of wide receivers in this draft fall, just because you have so many wide receivers that teams are going to prioritize other positions, knowing that they can circle back and get a wide receiver later. And then the third part of that would be what position is going to be most important and how are they going to fit into your team. All it takes is one team to fall in love with a player for them to go much higher than maybe they would be, their talent level would suggest. We see the Raiders a lot overdraft, it seems. They've got a former draft guru, Mike Mayock, as their general manager, but they fall in love with some guys that maybe other teams don't because they have a vision of where to put them. And I actually think, with a couple exceptions, the Raiders have had a couple pretty good drafts the past couple of years, drafting in that way. So as I came up with my big board, as we talk about all of this, we're going to keep in mind that GMs aren't as good as they think they are. There's only a 53% success rate in the first round, and that's the first round. So, obviously it drops from there. So if possible, teams want to trade back because it gives them more opportunities to get something right, unless they just absolutely fall in love with a player. But we see it all the time that teams fall in love with a player and they still doesn't work out for them. So in general, we want to trade back if possible. We want to have a couple guys at a couple different positions that we like, and we want to draft guys knowing what positions we're going to draft later. And that's generally my strategy for the draft, and a lot of GMs will follow that strategy throughout the draft.
So obviously different GMs have different strategies, and it sounds like you've developed your own. I imagine in a lot of ways it's an aggregate of different things that you've read and taken from people. In a lot of ways you've injected just, your general life philosophy, I'm sure, is kind of sprinkled into this. Where do you get a lot of these? Is there someone that you consider influential or like a really good GM that you've talked to or heard from or just listened to speak or, read a book? Or where did you start to kind of put together, and how did you start to put together your philosophy of drafting?
So for the past 5 years, I've made mock drafts for myself of I fall in love with usually 10 players a year, usually about 7 first rounders and then 3 guys substantially later. Just usually from draft experts, actually. I expect the reason it's draft experts is because GMs are never going to actually tell us what they think until after the draft. So the only way we figure out what GM strategies were are to watch the draft. So this talking season that we have, we're not hearing anything from NFL teams. We're hearing everything from draft experts, different things like that. And then there are also, and I can't think of what, it's like an NBC affiliate or an ESPN affiliate, I can't remember. Somebody has been putting out grading the mock drafts for years of, okay, who's the most accurate mock drafter as to where they actually go, so who's the most accurate as to what GMs are thinking. And then they'll retroactively 4 to 5 years later go back and say, okay, who had the best mock draft? So if you had, a lot of mock drafters didn't have Aaron Donald as a super high pick. But if somebody said, this guy's going to be a superstar and I've got him way high in the first round, then they would get a ton of points for how that ended up working out. Or you've got guys that said, when they go back and grade 2 years ago, which was a very weird draft, you'll have guys that most people were saying, okay, Lamar Jackson's maybe a fringe second or third rounder. All it takes is one team, but really he's not going to be that good. And you have like 3 or 4 guys that I follow that the entire time were saying, I would take him number 1 overall. This is the guy. This is going to be an NFL MVP. And those are the guys that would score well. One of those guys that I follow every single year, one of my favorite draft guys is Josh Norris over at Roto World. He has always been fantastic. He's a closet Panthers fan, which doesn't hurt things. But he has always been accurate with everything. He's pretty down to earth and pretty straightforward with. He'll tell you exactly how he came up with certain ideas, and he will tell you, this is what I'm thinking. This is why I think this guy will be really good. This is why I think this team would benefit from him. And year after year ranks as well or as good, if not better, than the NFL GMs. With which players he says will be really good, which players he says will struggle. Another guy that I like, I got to meet him at the Senior Bowl actually, is Jordan Reed. I think he's still at the Draft Network. I can't remember. He used to be. I can't remember if he's still there. He used to be a quarterback actually at NC Central. Really, really good draft expert. Definitely a guy that you want to follow on Twitter. Want to read all his mock drafts. Those are probably my 2 favorite guys, are Jordan Reed and Josh Norris. And then I picked up some things here and there. And then also it's just I'm a big college football fan. So when I'm watching games, there are guys that will stick out to me on film. And those are the first guys that I go back to and look at in the draft, not the guys at the top that we're told we're supposed to go look at. And these are guys going to be really good. Of course, I'll have time to go look at those guys. They're going to pop up. They're going to be talked about all the time on all these different draft podcasts, all of these different TV specials on Twitter, all of that. I go back and I specifically watch a lot of the guys that stood out to me when either South Carolina played them, whenever I just see them. Pac-12, I'm a big Pac-12 After Dark fan, so I'll run into some random Pac-12 guys that I didn't know existed. And I remember that Stanford had a safety a couple of years ago, and I can't think of what his name is. It'll come to me eventually. But I was watching a random game. I think it was like Stanford, Oregon or something like that, really, really late. And this guy was all over the place. I had no idea who he was. He was the first guy I went back and looked at because I'm like, he sticks out on film. As much of an analytics guy as I am, the film usually doesn't lie. If you've got a guy that's all over the place in college, he's probably going to be all over the place in the NFL. If you've got a guy that is just dominant in college, with a couple exceptions, pretty obvious exceptions, he's probably going to be pretty good in the NFL too. And I think that in the NFL gets devalued by GMs, is they think that they're smarter than the college game and that the NFL is so much different than the college game, and it's not. And that's mainly my default for I'm not sure what to do is if this guy was really good in college, he's probably going to be really good in the NFL.
I want to ask you a little bit more about your process in terms of how you weigh film versus how you weigh analytics, because, again, if anyone listened to this podcast during the college football season, you know how much we value and appreciate what analytics have done and are doing for the game. But you've mentioned mock drafts and you mentioned big boards. It feels like what we're doing here is probably a little bit closer to a big board because it's not necessarily saying, hey, this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, and going through more sort of looking at classes and assessing or I guess ascribing a value to each of these guys sort of as like an estimate. Like, here's the top of the class. These guys are probably going to go in the first couple rounds. Here's the middle part of the class. These are the middle rounds and then the late round guys. But in terms of how you think about it, how you organize it, what's the difference for you in mock drafts and big boards?
I think mock draft takes more into account what players are going to what teams. And especially when I see a mock draft, I don't even and a lot of mock drafts will actually, if you read the top, which nobody ever does, they just scroll down to their favorite team. The top of it will usually say, I know PFF did a mock draft. I know all of the Draft Network's mock drafts say this, is it's not an endorsement of I really like this guy versus I don't like this guy. It's more of this is what we're hearing about this team really likes this guy. This team really wants this kind of defensive end. So this, they're going to grab this guy. They're not afraid to grab a smaller defensive end or something like that. But it doesn't always have anything to do with how successful those players will be in the NFL. It's just this team likes this guy, so this is where we're going to pick them. Big boards, to me, ultimately, if we're talking NFL-wide, we don't care as much that this player is going to this team. We want to see who are going to be the stars of the future. So when I'm looking at mock drafts, I'm always scrolling down who are the Panthers picking, who are the Panthers rivals picking, and then where are South Carolina guys going. Those are the three things that I look at when I look at a mock draft. When I look at a big board, I'm looking at, okay, who are going to be the superstars 5 years from now? Who's going to be the household name that we either knew was going to be, it could be a Cam Newton that everybody in the world knew he was going to be the first pick of the draft. He lived up to the hype until some of the injuries. And just, we know this guy's going to be a superstar versus this is a Russell Wilson. We knew him in college, but he dropped down to the third or fourth round. I can't remember. But there were people that year saying Russell Wilson's going to be really, really, really good. And so when we look at a big board, we're looking at these are going to be the stars. And so most big boards, I think, are the ones that I look at or prefer to look at are going to be more weighted towards wide receivers, quarterbacks, defensive ends, DBs, maybe a standout offensive tackle, but more kind of like I structured mine of these are the superstars. So, for example, I'm looking at my big board here in just a second, if I can get it to load. I think I've got 4 quarterbacks in the top 10 of my big board. That doesn't mean I think that there are 4 quarterbacks that are first-round talents. It just means that there are 4 quarterbacks that could be solid starters for years to come. And 5 years from now, if we look back at who are the impact players from this class, a lot of times it's going to be more quarterback heavy. So when I look at a big board, I'm not necessarily looking at this is going to be the number 1 player. This is going to be the number 2 player. This is going to be the number 3 player. I kind of look more at this player is going to have the biggest impact. This player is going to have a really big impact. And that's kind of what I'm looking at when I'm looking at big boards. So I would say that what we're doing here is much more like a big board than a mock draft. If this gains traction and people start asking, okay, who do you think the Browns are going to pick? Who do you think, all of this kind of stuff, then we can do that. But I think it's more helpful in this kind of setting to do, here are the players that we think are going to be superstars.
So a truer, I guess, assessment and prediction of talent is the big board, and the mock draft is too circumstantial just based on where people are picking and, potential trades and things like that might happen. So more of a big board, more of just an honest assessment, evaluation of talent based on what you've seen on film and what you have seen in the numbers. You're a big pro football focus guy. How do you weigh those things? 50-50, 60-40 film, 80-20 analytics? What's your process?
So this is going to sound like a true analytics guy, but the analytics very rarely will tell you something that the film doesn't. It will usually strengthen a point. So we could look at film and say, for example, offensive lineman and say, wow, this guy looks really good in pass protection. Then we can go to the PFF numbers and say, well, he didn't allow a sack in 2 years. So, yeah, obviously he is really good in pass protection. And so we can look at things like that. And then we can look at some of the smaller things that maybe don't stand out on film, but can give us a comparison to 200 players versus, looking at the one player. So when we look at this, offensive tackle, I go film first when we're looking at offensive line because a guy that doesn't dominate in college on the offensive line especially will not at any point dominate in the NFL. There are some positions where that might be that there might be exceptions to that at certain positions, especially on offense if you've got a scheme that just doesn't fit a guy. I've read a lot of people saying Justin Herbert's actually going to be better in the NFL because a scheme will be better for him in the NFL than Oregon's scheme. I don't know if I buy that. But especially offensive tackle, if you're not blowing guys off the ball almost every play at college, you're not going to do that in the NFL. So we've got to look at the film first, and then we're going to look at the analytics to back that up and to kind of give us, a numerical value to what we're seeing on film, kind of combining that qualitative info that we get from film and putting some quantitative info in there with combining analytics and then some combine stuff, some testing numbers and things like that.
I'm kind of putting you on the spot here. I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this, but can you think of a guy that you've evaluated where there was a huge disparity either the film really didn't bear out what the advanced metrics said, or the advanced metrics, led you to believe that a guy was going to be a lot better than he looked on film, and it actually played out like that?
So I think Russell Wilson is really the guy that I can think of. The numbers loved Russell Wilson. Anybody that loved numbers loved Russell Wilson. But he played at Wisconsin and NC State, which NC State has put out some quarterbacks. Shout out to Phillip Rivers. There were a couple good quarterbacks from NC State, but Russell Wilson never really got a chance to dominate the college game like he has in the NFL. But the numbers show that he's always been really accurate on NFL types of throws. The throws he's less accurate on in college were less NFL throws. Not a lot of things breaking outwards. The NFL loves out-breaking routes. And Russell Wilson's one of the best in the league at out-breaking routes. He's one of the best in the league at deep balls. Different things that in college you either don't run as much or you combine with other types of routes that you can get away with at the college level that you can't really in the NFL. A couple notable overall in the NFL, you're not going to go over the middle of the field that much. The biggest exception to that is Deebo Samuel. Deebo Samuel just thrives in the middle of the field, and that's why he's been so good for the 49ers in his first year. But a lot of out-breaking routes, and Russell Wilson always in college was really, really accurate on those throws. Maybe a little bit less accurate on some of the in-breaking routes, some of the deeper in routes and things that you don't see a lot in the NFL. And so once he got to the NFL, once he got a couple some better playmakers around him at the wide receiver position, some guys that really know their roles, he broke out in the NFL. And I think anybody that looked at numbers in college was like, yeah, he's going to be really good in the NFL. That's not going to be an issue. And then the other way, I think, the numbers don't love Lamar Jackson as much as his film, but that's just because you can't quantify what he's doing when he makes defenders look silly and things like that. And so that one would be kind of he was so dominant in college that there was no way he wasn't going to be really good in the NFL. No matter what the numbers say, he was just so athletic in college and so much better than everybody else in the field that you knew he was going to be, well, most people knew he was going to be really good in the NFL.
So that to say, this is an inexact science. Maybe some would even call it an art, but the point is you can be wrong for both reasons, so striking the balance is the key here. And of course, as you mentioned, it's a 53% success rate on average in the first round, and these are people that do it professionally for a living. So an inexact science is what I'll call it, or an art, whatever you want to say. You can go both ways. You said specifically with offensive linemen, as we transition into the first position group that you're going to break down here, you lean a little bit more heavily on film, and just because the numbers don't necessarily always bear that out, and you can always tell when somebody's just running over people. What was unique about evaluating this offensive line class, or was it a pretty standard O-line class?
It's a really weird offensive line class because it's the most top-heavy class in the draft. There are 4 guys that I've heard NFL evaluators and guys that work for teams basically say, we could take any of those 4 guys and be just fine, but beyond that, there's no first-round offensive lineman. So I've got 4 on my big board. I've got 4 offensive linemen in the top 10. And then I don't have a single offensive lineman on the list until about 40 after that. So there's a massive, massive gap, which means if you have an offensive lineman heavy or needy team, you're more likely to see them draft or trade up or down in this class than other classes, just because if you're sitting at 20 in the draft, you should not get an offensive lineman. We should not see an offensive lineman go between 15 and 25. And if we do, it's a major, major reach or something crazy has happened and one of the offensive linemen magically falls 15, which is not going to happen.
So the 4 guys you have here in, I guess these sort of, we'll call it like a round 1 grade, but it sounds like even more than that. You said you have 4 quarterbacks and 4 offensive linemen in your top 10 on your big board. Is that right?
Yeah. Okay. I've got 2 big boards. Let me say my overall big board, I don't have 4 quarterbacks there. When I'm talking about I should clarify, one of my big boards is these are the guys that we're going to hear about in the next few years. And so I do have all 4 of the big quarterbacks on that list pretty high. My actual big board, if I can get it to load, and the one I've been using just kind of overall of I think these guys are the best. I have 2 quarterbacks up there. I think the 2 quarterbacks at the top are pretty obvious at this in this class. And then you've got your 4 offensive linemen, which I've seen interchangeably. I haven't seen a single person that has argued that any of these guys are not in the top 4. I have not seen a single guy argue that one of them is way, way better than the others. And so mine are a little bit backwards. I love Andrew Thomas from Georgia. He's my number 1 guy in this class. I've seen him more in the 3 to 4 range between these 4 guys, but you can't go wrong with any of these guys. And I've got Andrew Thomas there. He's just a solid overall, can both pass block and run block. Sam Pittman was his coach in college, so he got good coaching. No red flags or anything like that. He's just a really solid, I need an offensive tackle. This is your guy. And we'll talk a little bit about where I guess I see a couple of these guys going in a couple minutes. But number 2 on my list of offensive linemen, I've got Tristan Wirfs from Iowa, who is just insanely athletic. His combine numbers are absolutely ridiculous for a tight end that would be really good. And he's sitting there, as an offensive lineman. And I think he's still like 6'4", 320. My computer's not loading right now, so that'd be great if it would. But still big. But his shuttle was the best in the class. Was one of the best in the class. His 3-cone was really good. His 40-yard dash was insanely good. He benched a bunch. This guy is just a freak of nature athletically. And so you can't go wrong with crazy athletic offensive linemen because you can teach technique. And his technique might not be as good as some of these other guys up on the list, but, you can't teach speed, you can't teach size, and he's got both of them. So because of that, he's the guy that we're looking at for a team that just really needs an athletic offensive lineman. He can start day one, and this is the guy. And so if you've got a team that needs an offensive lineman and is valuing athletic ability, he's the guy that's going to go to them. Then you've got Jedrek Wheels from Alabama, another just really solid offensive lineman. Nothing flashy. He's a big dude, which is, you always want big offensive linemen, but nothing flashy. Started at Alabama for a couple years, so that is always a good thing to see guys that start at big-time schools. But, no red flags there. He's just another solid player. I've seen a lot of guys have him as the number 1 offensive lineman in this draft. Just kind of, again, depends on what teams value in their offensive linemen and what kind of skills they're looking at. And we'll talk about, I guess, a little bit about that in just a second. And then the 4th guy on the list is Makai Becton from Louisville, who is just absolutely ginormous. That's his biggest thing. He's huge and has good feet, and that's pretty rare for an offensive lineman. He's not going to get tripped up. He's not going to lose his balance. But at the same time, he's 6'7", 370 pounds. And his combine numbers for that weight and size are really, really good. And so that's what we're kind of looking at. He ran a 5'1" at the combine, which for an offensive lineman is not bad at all. For an offensive lineman that's 6'7", 370 pounds, that's really, really, really good. So he's our 4th offensive lineman. I've got him listed 4th just because he's not at that size. You're never going to be just as smooth or as quick as some other offensive linemen. The one notable example from years past would be Orlando Brown, was just absolutely gigantic and had some of the best feet in the history of football for offensive linemen. But he's a good pass blocker. Played in 2 different schemes at Louisville. You always like to see that. Shows some versatility. And I like him too. But mainly he's huge. And you're going to hear about it when he gets drafted. They're just going to talk about how big he is and how smooth he is. But when you have those two as a combination, that's pretty good. And so those are my top four for this draft class.
You mentioned how you organize and prioritize guys. Obviously, offensive tackle is going to be a lot more valuable than interior offensive linemen. As you mentioned, it's a pass-first league. Left tackles are basically, other than quarterbacks and really elite pass rushers, I mean, that's where the most money is being spent on the NFL nowadays, it seems. I guess I don't have those numbers right in front of me, but that seems like it's the case. Are these the four best offensive linemen in the class, or are these the four best tackles, and tackles are more valuable than guards and centers, and so that's why they're in this upper crust of, like, basically top 1% guys?
In this particular class, they're the best offensive linemen overall. There aren't a lot of really good interior offensive linemen in this class, which, again, not the worst thing in the world. A team, if you're going to struggle on the inside of the offensive line versus the outside of the offensive line. If you don't believe me, just look at the Panthers when they went to the Super Bowl a couple of years ago and had a phenomenal interior offensive line and could not do anything because Von Miller just terrorized them the whole game because you just got the Panthers had horrible offensive tackles. They've had horrible offensive tackles for years. That's my experience with it. But this particular class, the offensive tackles are just way better than the interior offensive linemen.
So can you take us behind the curtain a little bit? Because, I mean, I watch a lot of football, not as much as you, but like you said, you can tell when there's an offensive lineman that's just blowing somebody up and he's got like 50 pancakes in a game and just nobody can stop him. But the minutia is where I get a little bit lost. I haven't played the position. I mean, you're not an offensive lineman, but you watch enough film that you sort of know what you're looking for. How do you look for hands and for feet and for body positioning and for leverage and things like that enough to differentiate between Thomas, Wirfs, Wills, and Becton?
So when you're looking at probably the easiest thing would be feet, because all you're looking at is if they look awkward, they are awkward. If they don't look awkward, they're doing what they're supposed to. At offensive lineman, it really, for the feet, it boils down to, do they look good? And if so, then their feet are good. If they don't look good, if they look a little awkward, they look off balance, then they probably need to move their feet, which sounds simple, but as an offensive lineman, I mean, I'm, 5'9", 140. So I don't have this issue of my feet not going where I want them to. But as an offensive lineman, if you're 6'5", 320, a lot of times your feet are going to follow behind your body, and they're not going to lead you. And when that happens, you get off balance. You can't lean into things. Your feet always have to go first. And so if we look at, if you guys have ever seen the offensive line drill where they just start a pass set and then they shuffle their feet out and then shuffle back in, what evaluators are looking for there is what's leading. Is it the body that's leading? Are they leaning a little bit and the feet are kind of following that? Or are the feet getting to a spot before the body is? Because when you're just moving around, that might not be the worst thing in the world. But when you have a defensive end coming at you and your body is leaning, you're going to be so far off balance that you're going to get blown back or blown off to the side from a defensive end trying to get you off of them. And that's where we look at for the defensive ends, the hands, and, do they have good hands? If they get an offensive lineman that's off balance, they're going to easily just kind of push them off to the side because they don't have the base that they need to be able to protect and to stay in front of the defensive end. So what we're looking for with the feet is just what's leading when they're moving. Are their feet going first, or is their body going first? And when you look at all four of these guys, Wirfs is going to be the best with his footwork. It's because he's crazy athletic. And that's basically it there is he's 6'5", 322, but runs a sub-540, has great quickness drills. This is where we look at the combine for the 3-cone, for the shuttle drill, all that kind of stuff. And even the first 10 of the 40-yard dash, we're looking at those things to see, okay, do they have good feet? Can they move? Can they move their feet before their body? So that's what we're looking at. And then hands, we're looking at how strong are their hands and are they where they're supposed to be? If an offensive lineman gets their hands outside of their frame, that's bad news. If their hands go any far out and they look like they're surfing or whatever, they're going to be way off balance. They're going to get blown off the ball by even a competent defensive end. They don't have to be a really good defensive lineman. So everything has to stay inside, has to stay tight. And then the question is, can they punch out? Can they get to where they need to get to while leading with their feet and not losing position of their hands? And so are their hands staying tight on the inside? And so what I'm looking for that is, I think I mentioned on here before, I did karate for years. My old karate instructor actually does offensive line and defensive line drills for hand placement. He played football at South Carolina State in college. He was running back, but he does hand placement drills. And can you get your hands to where they need to be without losing the rest of your body? Because the number one thing that we see, in any sport, if somebody tries to punch or anything, whether that's an offensive line technique punch or we're looking at boxing, who are the good boxers? The ones that can throw a punch without moving the rest of their body. And so our natural tendency is to throw our entire body into things. Can you stay straight up? Can your feet stay where they need to be? And can your hands punch out directly to where they need to go without you falling off balance? And for offensive linemen, again, when you're trying to control that much body weight, that can be difficult. And so we're looking at these guys. I think Thomas has the best hands of anybody in the group. That's just my personal opinion. He's a good run blocker. He's a good pass blocker. We see both of those. Run blocking, pass blocking, the main difference, a little bit different with RPOs now, being run blocking, you're moving forward. Pass blocking, you're moving backwards or staying where you are. And so the footwork for those two things are different. But usually if you've got good footwork for one, you have good footwork for the other. There are exceptions to that. But for the most part, if you've got good footwork, you've got good footwork in both pass blocking and run blocking. And so those are the things that we're looking at. And then, of course, for an offensive lineman is, are you quick and do you have size? Because ultimately, if you're 370 pounds and can move, like Makai Becton, you're going to be up there even if you've got some flaws in your game that can be corrected, because you just can't teach a guy to be 370 pounds. It just doesn't work. So you've got a guy that's 370 pounds. There are going to be some offensive line coaches out there that say, we can teach him and we can fill in the gaps in his game because he's just so big and so athletic.
So for all these guys to essentially have a top 10 grade, there's not a lot between them. If I'm a GM and I'm just making picks based on listening to this podcast, first of all, I don't know how long I'm going to have a job. I feel like I need to watch some of the film myself. But based on what you've said, it sounds like I'm going to go with Tristan Wirfs because he has the length, he has the speed, he has the athleticism. Sounds like, and you said he has really good feet. I don't know if you think he has the best feet, but has the footwork, which makes sense if he's athletic. Is Andrew Thomas over him just because of his hands? Is it because of what you've seen in the film, or is it because of something that shows up in the analytics that gives Thomas the edge?
So I think one of the things with Thomas is he's going to fit in any scheme. Tristan Wirfs is not going to fit in any scheme. If you've got a team that really likes gigantic offensive linemen that just blow people off the ball, you're not going to find that in Tristan Wirfs. His film is going to be really good, but his film is going to be a lot of athletic plays and him shifting over and getting a guy on a stunt that there's no way you would think that a guy can make that block. But he's going to be able to reach over and block 3 gaps over from where he needs to be. So if you've got a zone blocking scheme, he's definitely a guy that you're going to look at because he can block anywhere. He's got the footwork and he's got the football IQ to get there. But if you're looking, one thing that I don't think, and I could be very wrong on this, I don't think the Cardinals would go with Tristan Wirfs. They're basically running a West Coast scheme, which is get the ball out as quickly as possible, let your receivers do a bunch of stuff on the outside. They just picked up DeAndre Hopkins. They're going to be a really, really good offense. They've got Kyler Murray. I love Kyler Murray. Loved him last year when I was doing draft prep. Think he's going to be really good. They may end up going with Becton just because he's a big dude and he's hard to beat immediately. He's never going to get beat immediately off the ball because he's so big that you can't go through him. You have to go around him, and he's really big, so it takes you longer to go around him. So you may see a guy like Becton go to the Cardinals because they know they're going to get the ball out quickly, and they know that he's not going to get beat quickly. And so that he might fit in their scheme a little bit better than a scheme that would require him to maybe pull a little bit or to get across in maybe a zone blocking scheme where he might have to get across the formation and block somebody on the other side. Those are rare in the NFL, but you do have a couple teams that throw in some zone concepts. And especially in the RPO game, you'll see that a lot.
So Thomas and Wills are the kind of O-negative blood types of this offensive line class, where it sounds like both of those guys could go anywhere, where Wirfs and Becton are going to have to be drafted a little more based on need. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. Wills is a really, really strong dude. Like we say country strong, that's Wills. He's not going to stand out from any of the numbers perspectives. When I say numbers here, I'm talking combine numbers. He's going to be solid on all those combine numbers. He's not going to jump off the page athletically, but he doesn't get beat a lot. If I'm looking here at the numbers, he was one of the highest graded offensive linemen in the run game this year. He was 8th overall in the country in the run game, 7th when you factor in playing time. Only gave up 1 sack all season, but did give up a couple hurries, a couple hits. But he's just a really, really solid offensive lineman. His PFF grade overall for offensive linemen this year was 14th in the country for everybody. And that's him playing some really, really good competition, playing against some really good defensive ends week in and week out. And there were no games where it stood out where he was like, this guy might not be an NFL offensive lineman. He's an NFL offensive lineman through and through. You can see it on there, and he's going to start for a team. All 4 of these guys are going to be starting left or right tackles next year. Wills played a little bit more. Let me just make sure I'm getting this right. Wills played a little bit more played all of right tackle last year, which one thing you have to think about is left tackle is usually more important, but who was Alabama's quarterback last year? It was Tua for most of the season. Yeah. Tua's left-handed, so right tackle is actually his blind side. So some teams may look at that and say, wow, he could play left tackle or right tackle. We really like that.
That's a good way to think about that. I guess I had thought about the fact that Tua is left-handed, but didn't make the necessarily the connection, because it's the left tackles that make the money, not the right tackles. But it's just because most people are right-handed. Adds an element of versatility there. All right, so we're talking mostly big boardy kind of talk about these guys. But if we can go mock draft for just a second, would you be surprised to see all 4 of these guys go in the top 10?
I would be surprised to see all 4 of them go in the top 10. I've done a couple mock drafts, and where I've got them on my mock draft, I think I've got basically every single one of them. I have 3 mock drafts just because. But here's the one. Let me see if I can find the one with trades. Because I did a mock draft with some trades because I'm that nerdy. My main one that I like a lot, I've got Wills going 4th overall to the Giants. I could absolutely see Becton going there. The Giants GM is Dave Gettleman. Dave Gettleman loves large offensive linemen. So could absolutely see Becton going there. Could absolutely see Thomas going there, really any of them. But I think the Giants are going to kind of start the dominoes in the offensive line. I guess the offensive line run on offensive linemen at the beginning of the first round. Joe Burrow's going first, and the Redskins are taking Chase Young probably. But in this one, I've got the Dolphins trading up for Tua, which leaves number 4 is the first team really that needs an offensive tackle, which the Giants really are in this draft, the team that's going to take the first offensive tackle, I would think. So the Giants are going to take whatever player they want. I have Wills in this one. I've seen Thomas. I've seen Wirfs. I've seen Becton. I would lean a little bit more towards Wills or Becton for the Giants in this one, just because it's the Giants drafting. And then I've got the Cardinals, Jets, and Browns all taking an offensive tackle. What's interesting in this mock draft that I've got is I have it almost backwards for how I have them ranked in my big board. I've got Becton going to the Cardinals. I've got him ranked number 4 on my big board, but in the mock draft have him going second, just because, again, I think the Cardinals could really benefit from having a really big offensive tackle. I've got Wirfs going to the Jets. I think that's the most, if he's there, there are probably going to be 2 of them left when the Jets pick at number 9. I think that they're going to take Wirfs. I think he fits their scheme perfectly. I think Sam Darnold would love to have Wirfs he's the guy that I look at and go, yeah, he's probably going to go to the Jets. Obviously, that can change. If the Giants fall in love with Wirfs and take him first, then, that throws it off. The Jets can't take him. But I think if we're matching up a team player fit, Wirfs to the Jets is the best one here. And then the Cleveland Browns, I've read several mock drafts that literally have them going with, they took this guy because he was the fourth offensive lineman. And they're really just going to pick the best. Their big board is going to be the top, these four guys in some order, and they're going to take the best one available. So if they've got, Thomas ranked first and he's still there, they're going to take Thomas. If they've got, Wirfs is their highest ranking guy left, which again, he's probably I think is going to the Jets. So I don't think he'll be there at 10 for the Browns. The Browns are just going to take whatever offensive tackle is highest left on their board. We don't know their internal board, but it's one of these four guys, and they're just going to take the best left, in their opinion, of these four guys. And so I've got all four of them going top 10, I guess. Another team we could possibly see going to, one of these guys going to, I could see a team trading up, maybe the Jaguars trading up for one of these guys. I could see the Buccaneers maybe trading up for one of these guys. I've even seen the Dolphins trading up to get both Tua and Wills. But really, these four guys are going to go, latest would be to the Buccaneers at 14. And I don't think any of these guys last outside the top 10.
So you think that the Panthers are for sure going to go with a defensive tackle at 7 then? Because they could certainly – I know they just traded for Russell Okung. I don't know if that's a long-term option for them. You don't think it's worth the Panthers taking – it wouldn't be a flyer, but you don't think it's worth them spending that 7th pick on one of these guys?
Maybe. I think there are more pressing needs right now for this team. I think they can pick and find an offensive tackle in free agency. They've got Okung. They're really high on Dennis Daly. They think he may start this year again. So, shout out former South Carolina guy, kind of breaking the mold of a, 7th-round pick, 6th-round pick, something like that. Started a lot last year. So I think that they'll go with some insurance later in the draft. But I don't see them going offensive tackle. I actually have them going with Isaiah Simmons in this one. I think in that new defensive scheme that Isaiah Simmons could thrive for the Panthers. And I'm not normally big on taking a linebacker, but Isaiah Simmons is not a linebacker. He is a playmaker. I have him listed as an athlete on everything. We'll talk about that when we get to the linebacker class. But I've got them taking Isaiah Simmons or trading back because there are going to be a lot of teams that do need an offensive tackle. And like I said earlier, you're not going to find an offensive tackle between like 13 and 25. If you do, you're going to be overdrafting.
All right, so that takes us into our second group here. Basically, between 2nd and 4th round is probably fair to say for this group of 4 of Lloyd Cushenberry, Cesar Ruiz, Matt Hennessy, and Lucas. I don't know how to say his last name.
Yeah, Lucas Niang is going to be a offensive tackle from TCU. I think he'll go first round. I don't have a first round grade on him. There's just going to be a team that needs an offensive tackle enough to take him above where he might be on big boards or where his talent level might be. Because, again, you'd rather have an average offensive tackle and find that in the draft than draft a really good linebacker because, if we think about the best linebackers in football, they're just not on the best teams. And you can find linebackers or running backs or, some of these other positions later, and it's really hard to find an offensive tackle later in the draft. You can run into one, but usually it's not that you had, all along you knew that this guy was going to fall the 5th round and you picked him knowing he was going to start. It's usually he's there, you take a flyer on him, and he does really well in training camp and he starts. I think that last year Houston took that guy from Alabama State. I can't think of what his name is. He was not a first round predicted to go in the first round, but Houston needed an offensive tackle, so they took him in the first round. I've got in this particular mock draft, I've got the Dolphins doing a couple trades. They've got a lot of draft capital. I've got the Dolphins taking Niang as the 3rd offensive lineman at 26 overall in the draft. which would be the last offensive lineman in the first round.
Is he the top guy in this group? I just sort of read them in order. I didn't know if these were written in order that they occurred on your big board. Cushenberry, Ruiz, Hennessy, Niang. It sounds like Niang is maybe the best option of those four, or you just think that's where you think some team is just going to reach for him in particular?
They're going to reach for him because he's an offensive tackle. And so that really is the thing that makes him different from these other guys. I personally, out of this group, like Cushenberry and Hennessy, it's really interesting. We'll see what happens. Cushenberry did not have a very good year according to PFF. He was actually just slightly above average, which is not what you want from a first to early second round offensive lineman. He really did not grade that well. But played for LSU, played in a very, very good offense. So part of it could be you just didn't notice him because all the rest of the players around him were just kind of taking the spotlight away from him. Also plays center, which is kind of more important than guard. He can play guard. And he has some more than really almost any other offensive lineman, including these top four, has more wow moments on film. Now, there are a lot of moments where you look at it and go, this is not good. We don't want this from our offensive linemen. But Cushenberry has some really, really big moments this year where he stands out as this is really good. He played really well against Auburn. Auburn, we know, has some really good defensive tackles. One of them that's going to go very early in the draft. One of them that probably is going to slip out to defensive end and go second round. And he played really well against Auburn. And so he's got moments on film where it's like, this guy is really, really good. But he also has other moments where it's like, there's definitely consistency issues, but he's probably my favorite out of these for draft purposes. Because, again, I think he's a second-round pick. And in the second-round pick, you're not expecting your second-round pick to come in and start day one. Maybe he's going to, maybe he's not. But a second-round center that can play both guard positions is not going to be the worst thing in the world. I've got him pretty high. I've got Hennessy from Temple. I think he's a very good offensive lineman. I think he's got a lot of potential. He's probably going to be a late day 2, maybe early day 3. I've got him listed way above where most players or most drafts will have him listed. I've got like a second round, early third round grade on him. You're going to see a late third, early fourth round grade from some people. But I'm a big fan of Hennessy's game. I think it translates well to the NFL. And I think some team's going to be really happy to find him middle of day 2, maybe even day 3.
I wouldn't be surprised to see the Panthers take him. They decided, especially with Matt Rule coming into town, because Matt Rule was coming into town, that they're just going to take a bunch of Temple guys, including a couple guys yesterday they signed, P.J. Walker from the XFL. I wouldn't be surprised to see the Panthers maybe go that direction just because of the Temple connection, even if he didn't actually play for Matt Rule. Although I don't know, because Rule left in 2016, so if he played all 4 years, then I guess he would have been there. But that's neither here nor there. We can talk a little bit more about the Panthers.
He's probably recruited by him or something.
Yeah.
I actually have him. I have a couple Panthers mock drafts where I just picked the Panthers. Draft Network lets you do full 7-round mock drafts, and you can do one for every team. You can control the entire draft. You can pick one team, 2 teams. I've done a couple with the Panthers, and I have Hennessy, I think, in 2 of them to the Panthers in like round 3 or round 4.
So these are the group of guys that are going to go 2 through 4. This last group is, I guess, kind of the 5 through 7 types. You have sleeper written next to these 3 guys. Ben Bartsch from St. John's College, Isaiah Wilson from Georgia, and Charlie Heck from North Carolina. What separates these guys from the Cushenberry, Ruiz, Hennessy, Niang group?
So Ben Bartsch, there's always going to be issues with level of play. He's a D3 guy that absolutely dominated. PFF actually, since he plays for such a small school, did not grade him this season because he did not play a single school that was graded on PFF. PFF went back in their draft guide and decided to grade all the offensive tackles, and he had the highest offensive tackle grade they've ever graded in the past 5 years. He graded out, I'm trying to load it right now. I had it written down earlier. I think a 98.5 out of 99 was his season-long grade. He didn't give up a sack. He gave up 2 quarterback hurries all season. He's playing D3, so, let's be honest here. So 97 pass blocking grade, which was by far the best in the country. Only gave up 1 hurry all season, 4 pressures total. But the one thing that's always going to be a thing with these guys are he played for the St. John's Johnnies, which when you have a mascot like that the level of competition is not great. St. John's is a really good D3 school, really, really good D3 school, but it's a D3 school. So you can see offensive linemen a lot of times go out. He actually was recruited as a tight end to a D3 school, switched over, started growing, as is the story with a lot of these late rounds / small school offensive tackles is recruited. I think he was like 200 pounds when he was recruited, and now he's up to 6'6", 305. But he didn't really he wasn't even on the radar of NFL teams until the Senior Bowl. Shout out to the Senior Bowl. I was there this year. He was great. They took a flyer on him. And even then, people were like, really, why are you going to take, this guy over some maybe more deserving offensive tackles? And he dominated. He was probably the best offensive lineman at the Senior Bowl. And so he's a guy that we don't know a lot about him. We don't know how his game's going to translate because he's going from D3 competition straight to the NFL. So he probably needs, quote unquote, a redshirt year in the NFL. He's not going to come in. He's not going to start immediately, but he's got all the tools that you're looking for. If you're just evaluating him and you didn't have his name or his school on the back of his jersey, you would put a first or second round grade on this guy just from his tools.
So when you're evaluating a guy like that, let's just say for all the GMs, for everyone that's thinking about drafting him, it's not really possible to do that. You have context, you know the name, you know the school, and that is probably a worthwhile consideration that he didn't play stiff competition. I mean, not even D2, not even FCS, but to be all the way in Division III, which is, that's non-scholarship football, right?
Most of the time, yeah.
Okay. So when they get to the 6th and 7th rounds, these NFL teams, is there a chance, or what is it going to take for a GM to take a chance on him as opposed to somebody like Isaiah Wilson and Charlie Heck that, look, even if you're not a draftnik, you're going to know the names Isaiah Wilson and Charlie Heck if you watch enough college football because those guys were good offensive linemen on good, high-profile Power 5 teams. What's it going to take for Barch, whom you have listed above Wilson and Heck, and it seems like you're intrigued by the upside and the potential variance that he offers. What's it going to take for a team to take a chance on him over a Wilson or a Heck?
So, first of all, it only takes one team. You can have 31 teams that have a 7th-round grade on him and one team that has a 3rd-round grade on him, and he could go in the 3rd round. It probably wouldn't be smart. GMs are always trying to figure out where other teams have guys ranked so that you're not overdrafting, quote unquote. But I think I'm glad you asked that question because it kind of goes back to what are you looking for in a first rounder versus what are you looking for in a late rounder. In a first rounder, you want a guy that has the best chance of success. You're looking for we need an offensive tackle that's going to help the team right away, so we're going to draft an offensive tackle that's going to help the team right away. But in a late round draft pick, you're maybe looking for a guy, you maybe fall in love with 1 or 2 of his traits. And you might be able to say, you're looking for a guy you might be able to work with, a guy that maybe impressed you in interviews. That's going to be interesting this year because you don't have in-person interviews for a lot of things. You don't have pro days. That's going to be really interesting in teams' draft, strategies this year, having really not as much information about guys. But a lot of times it might come from a trainer, maybe guys training with a guy that worked with an NFL offensive line coach on your team, and they've been talking, and the trainer says, yeah, this is one of the best guys I've worked with. You're going to trust that trainer. You're going to maybe pick a guy that you have some sort of connection to. We talked about Matt Rule maybe drafting some Temple guys, some Baylor guys, because he's got a connection there. If you've got a connection to one of these guys, that could push you over the top we want this guy. Another thing is if you fall in love with one trait maybe you really, really love how a guy pass blocks. And Barch is one of the best pass blockers. He was phenomenal at the Senior Bowl in pass blocking sets. If you're a team that loves to pass the ball, you might be looking for a guy that's like, okay, we need a tackle that can pass block. And if he doesn't work out, he's a sixth-round pick, whatever. But if he does work out, you're looking at a solid starter for years to come because he worked out in the way that you need him to work out. We'll never know because a guy can't play for two teams at once. But you could have a guy that is drafted at the exact same spot, the exact same guy, and theoretically have a great career with one team and then not have a good career with another team just based on how that team wants to use him in their system. Another thing that would probably put Barch above at least Heck is when we talk about gigantic, he's bigger than Makai Becton. He is Becton, sorry. He's Heck is, I think, 6'8", 375 pounds or something like that. I interviewed him at the Senior Bowl, and the video was not good because I couldn't get my camera high enough to get his face in the picture. The dude is just gigantic, which means he's not going to play guard. He's not going to play center. And as a sixth-round pick, you want a guy that can play multiple positions. That's why Stanley went in the sixth round over maybe some guys that were a little bit more talented last year because he came in and he didn't have to learn how to play guard or center or anything like that because when he played at South Carolina, he cross-trained at every position on the offensive line. So you're looking for guys that have positional versatility. If you're drafting really backups in the sixth round, in the seventh round, the fifth round, so you're looking for a guy that can back up three positions instead of one position. You're also looking for guys that might be well-coached in college and guys that might not be well-coached in college, just depending on how good you think your offensive line coach is. You could be drafting a guy that may not have had great coaching in college, and you could say, you know what, we can work with his physical abilities and work with our offensive line coach can teach him technique. We can't teach, how strong somebody is, and this guy's really strong, so we're going to pick him. Or you're looking the opposite way. Isaiah Wilson was a five-star recruit in high school. I think the Rivals had him as the number 3 offensive tackle in the country in the 2017 class, I think. Played at Georgia, again, under Sam Pittman, one of the best offensive line coaches in the country. So he's got the talent and he's got the coaching. If he can put it all together, he could be a solid player for a team. And so those are some guys that I really like. That doesn't mean they'll be the only guys that will work out. It doesn't mean that these guys will work out. It's just guys that I, kind of like on film and for different things. Like I like Heck's size. I like that Isaiah Wilson has always had, guys that are fifth round or not fifth round or that are 5-star picks or 5-star recruits. I'm trying to get getting draft and recruiting mixed up. Guys that are 5-star recruits, typically, if they work out at some point, they work out. Because they're not overranked in high school usually that often. It's more they just never put it all together. They've got the tools to put it together. So we're looking for big-time recruits. We're looking for guys that worked with good offensive line coaches, and we're looking for guys that just stand out from one perspective or another. And so, like Barch's pass blocking ability is what puts him above a lot of these other guys.
This is exactly why I was excited to do this. I never would have gone deep enough into the offensive line class for this draft to even hear about this Ben Barch guy, much less understand his story and understand why when I see him go on day 2 instead of at the very end of the draft, I'm going to be really excited and I'm going to be really rooting for him for his entire NFL career. Someone else that you did not mention here, and I won't say it's really a notable omission except for people that are listening to this around Columbia, maybe the Charlotte area, wherever South Carolina fans are listening to this. Donell Stanley, I don't think necessarily projects to be a guy that's I don't want to say he's not good enough to be drafted because he's a good solid offensive lineman, but it always seemed like he was going to be a late round pick or an undrafted free agent. But what do you see being the future for Donell Stanley?
So one thing that is, I guess, kind of some pros and cons that have nothing to do with his playing ability. Biggest pro is he's played inside. He's going to be an interior offensive lineman. He could probably swing out, be some sort of, sixth swing player on an offensive line, but he plays center and guard. And he played both of those at a very high level. He was one of PFF had him as one of the highest graded interior offensive linemen in the country last year. Some drawbacks: he's older than I am, which is really weird. So he's 24, which is not. I mean, it's only 2 years. It's not like a Hayden Hurst situation where he's getting drafted at 26, 27. Chris Winke's another guy that I'm thinking about that got drafted at a really old age. But that does, if all else is the same, you're probably going to draft a 21-year-old over a 24-year-old. There's bigger chance that they grow a little bit. There's more chance that they mature. What you're getting in Donell Stanley is more of a finished product than a guy earlier, which might be something for a team. But when you're drafting late or picking guys up in free agency, you want high upside guys. And unfortunately for Gamecock fans, Donell Stanley's not that super high upside guy. He can be a solid backup for years, and he can make lots of money in the NFL being a solid backup. But he's probably not going to be a guy that you draft and he becomes your starting center for the next 10 years. Probably not going to happen because he doesn't have a lot of room to grow. He got better every year in college, but you knew what you were going to get with him, which is a good thing, but also a bad thing because, you do like to take a late-round flyer on a guy that maybe didn't put it all together in college, and you're hoping he does in the NFL. Stanley put it all together in college, and so there's not very far to go. That being said, he's absolutely going to end up on a roster in training camp. He's absolutely talented enough to do that, and his positional versatility. You're going to keep a guy like him you're more likely to keep a guy like him on your roster than a guy that can only play one position or who you have to teach to play other positions. Super high football IQ, probably one of my favorite. I saw a tweet yesterday that was like, who are your favorite players that you've ever covered? Donell Stanley probably is one of my favorite players I ever covered at South Carolina. So I'm rooting for him probably more than really anybody. I really, really hope he sticks on a roster, and because if he can get on a roster, he could be a backup for years. Mm-hmm. And I think he can come in and not have really, really bad games. He's not going to come out and star and just blow people off the ball. He didn't do that in college. But he can be a quiet contributor, which on the interior offensive line is not the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, he's not going to kill you. And like you touched on, the biggest upside with him is that positional versatility, playing guard in college, playing center. He can probably play either guard position. And when you're that kind of teammate, because, I mean, he's one of those guys that the entire time he was at South Carolina, he seemed to be just about everybody's favorite teammate. That's just somebody that you want in your locker room. So there's a lot to be said, even if he's not going to be, a Pro Bowler or anything like that. I hope and would not be surprised if he ends up on a roster and has a nice, 7-8 NFL year career. But probably, frankly, would be surprised to see him drafted. Not just because he wasn't on your big board, which is, well, we got 1, 2, 3, 8, 11 guys on here that we'll all be watching out for. We've gone a little bit long on this, which I'm glad that we did because, this has been fantastic. But I got to let you go. We'll be back next time, I think next week, to break down our next position group. Haven't even decided what it is yet, so I can't tease it out for you. But, Will, this has been every bit as awesome as I thought it was going to be, and in fact better. So thank you so much for doing this. Y'all follow him on Twitter at WHelms21. And don't forget to check out PrepRA, prep-ra.com. If you or someone you know is an athlete that's trying to get ready to participate in whatever athletics at the next level. Will's been breaking down lax tape, too. So if you're a lax player and you need help breaking down film, if you need help with ACT prep, SAT prep, private group tutoring, all those things, especially because Will doesn't have to teach school anymore because school's canceled. Obviously it's not a good thing because of COVID-19, which is not a good thing. But Will is making lemonade out of lemons. You're not making lemons out of anything other than like maybe dirt and lemon seeds. But follow him on Twitter. Check out prep-ra.com. Will, thank you so much. Can't wait to do this again next week.